Hi, everybody. Welcome to another chat session on Through the Noise. And today I have Andros, the CEO and co-founder of Growth Terminal, with me.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to get deep into some chats.
And as you know, we tend to pick up this one micro topic, and you mentioned that what we called X today, but Twitter is something that you're deep into and very, very interested in. So, my very first question to you is a lot has changed on the platform in the last year. I think even I went pretty much off the platform and I've just reactivated my profile and started posting content. How do you see X fitting into a B2B marketing mix right now?
Yeah, so just a little bit of an intro into what we do and why it's sort of relevant to X and LinkedIn. At Grow Terminal, what we do is we believe that sort of building an audience is one of the most important things you can do today as a company. Distribution is everything, attention is everything that you need. There's obviously a lot of products and companies around AI coding, AI building, but less about sort of AI marketing. And that's what we do. We basically make it easy through content creation, through smart replies, through intelligent lead generation, helping people build an audience, particularly on Twitter and LinkedIn. And so, in terms of just how Twitter mixes in with B2B marketing, I think it depends on obviously the type of company that you are, what sector you are. But I do think everyone in tech, at least the frontier of tech, lives on Twitter. So whether or not you're building in AI, whether or not you're building in crypto, or even if you're just like traditional tech, let's say a lot of the, for example, Ramp team is on Twitter. They have big followings. Some of them do what we call shit posting, which is basically they just do a lot of trolling on Twitter, but that is also how they get their audience. I think you need to be on both. Obviously, like LinkedIn is very important for every professional who's on there for like the more heavy B2B enterprise marketing. But Twitter has definitely become very important, especially recently. There's someone called Nikita Beer who very sort of recently or previously was part of, he created two consumer apps, Gas App and To Be Honest, which were both acquired. He's kind of considered the sort of consumer app god of the industry, and he's now the head of product at Twitter. He's been tweaking things in a way where it seems like Twitter's getting more and more downloads, and sort of tech Twitter is more back than ever. And you can see that, just breaking out in sort of X can help you raise money, can help you get that investment check, can help you get that next customer. If you follow what Cluely does, for example, their initial breakout is all from Twitter. So I think it's key if you're working in a tech startup to actually be on there.
I do agree. For instance, I think one of the reasons I went off Twitter because I felt that I had a lot to say and I couldn't condense it. But then again, I was picked up as one of the top folks in content marketing because I was active on Twitter before I took that entire break because it gave personality to my thoughts and because all of my thoughts in concise fashion became like a go-to for people to quote, for people to kind of pick up on, ask questions on, have discussions on. It just became pretty overwhelming for me. But you're kind of right. The moment I've again become active on Twitter, there are folks that are connecting pretty rapidly. And then it's that multi channel touch. They're finding me eventually on LinkedIn as well. It does work really, really well. You're right. Absolutely right. So, from your perspective, what are the kind of posts that tend to perform the best on X today? Short one-liners, polls, visuals, threads, or shit posting, as you said.
I think it depends obviously on what you're trying to do with your brand. You kind of mentioned that you have to condense everything. I think recently, obviously, there have been algorithmic changes. Twitter and even obviously LinkedIn is switching a lot more to the algorithmic feed that TikTok does, which is basically like, it doesn't really matter if you have a big following. It's really based on the particular post that you're doing. And in terms of what works the best, the head of product who I just mentioned, Nikita Beer, had recently said the best sort of format is basically like 4 to 5 sentences, and that are educational pieces in your niche that will inform people, that can teach people, give value to people. That's basically the best format right now. Although there are some other things, basically like multimedia, like videos and images really capture people, because a lot of what they switch to is like, how long do you stay on a particular post, right? And usually, obviously, if you have video or if you have images, that is really good for keeping people on a particular tweet. So I say those would be the main things.
And well, we all know that X, in a way, is pretty fast paced as compared to other platforms. I think even TikTok is actually. But speaking of X, it does reward personality and speed. So, how can brands strike the right balance between being authentic, witty, and still professional?
Yeah, I think it's funny. We work with a lot of clients on the crypto side, and I think brands in that scenario actually tend to be even more like less professional and more just like seems like a person. If you're, for example, one of the best examples I've seen of a brand account is the Pudgy Penguins account. Pudgy Penguins, they're one of the sort of biggest projects in the space, but they also, sell out their physical toys in Walmart. And very much they have like intern accounts, which are basically, they reply to posts with memes, they post their own memes. And so in that way, I think X has a little bit more leeway where brands can actually like still be funny, and you kind of see it like the Ryanair account, for example, is also
Yes.
pretty
Mhm.
funny. And so it's a
Mhm.
little bit of a mix between, obviously being funny in a way that makes sense with your brand, whatever it might be, and also being able to post like value, right? So it's usually a mix between maybe 50% of the time we're posting updates of what we're doing and things in the industry that are interesting, and then still having that 10 or 20% where they're being funny and really reaching the people in their niche. Twitter definitely has more of that. And I'd say brands should definitely lean into it, especially reply guying is a big thing on X. So being able to like reply to posts in a funny way really helps get your exposure up.
Mhm. With most B2B companies, primarily, I have seen them use X as a customer support channel most of the times. Very rarely do we see very, very good examples. I think Grammarly does a good job. Even I think SEMrush also does a good job. And then
Mhm.
there's Duolingo, which is doing a fantastic job at even using X. But then most people would rather use it for customer support primarily because they don't want to also deep dive into that 20% of fun that can be had on the platform. What is your take on this? How stuck up should B2B brands be when they're using X, or should they adapt their personality based on platform and platform users?
They should definitely adapt the personality. I think, and that's actually a lot of what we help build is this idea of brand characters. So obviously on LinkedIn, it's much more professional, much more about like authentic, earnest storytelling. And, we help sort of brands construct that voice. And then on X, it's very much a lot more of course, there's still things around customer service when people like complain about your product on Twitter or LinkedIn, you want to be on top of it and you want to be like, hey, okay, we're going to fix this as soon as possible. But I think even as a B2B company, you want to, convey that personality of like, and I think that's part of why marketing and sales are blending together today as well, is like if people have heard of you, through just like being funny or having a personality on Twitter, let's say one of your sales reps then like DMs someone in the space asking to basically like, yeah, basically saying like, hey, use our product, even if they haven't, interacted with the company before, but they've heard about you, they're immediately already a warm lead. They're like, oh, I know who you are. Like I've seen your posts, or I've seen one of your team posts. That's another bigger thing, is like this idea of team led or founder led marketing, because of course we connect more with people rather than brands. So even if, the brand account itself is pretty funny, usually that's in combination with people who work in the team being personalities online, and you're like, oh, I know, Ramp is a great example. Obviously the CEO has great marketing in terms of like appearing on shows like TBPN, but there's other accounts which have a bigger following that people associate. Okay, I know this company. So I think it is pretty important to cater your voices to each platform.
Follow-up question because, well, your answer covered one part of it. I'm kind of interested. There's some platforms that obviously, company pages or company profiles tend to work better, but then there are other platforms where, as you said, founder-led voices work better. Like personally for me being active on LinkedIn has opened up a lot of doors for Contensify itself, right? And as you probably know, that marketing agencies in this space, and especially now, it's dime a dozen, right? They're just far too many. And for me to be able to talk to people, even if it's virtually, right, through a post, through maybe a video, through a comment, right, it just brings the personality of the brand forward. And then eventually people remember and then they come back and they're like, oh, I know that you do this, but would you be able to also help with that? On Twitter, particularly, what do you recommend is a better way? Because a lot of our listeners are also going to be startups that are thinking about, using social media or not using social media, and attribution, especially organic social, is pretty poor, so to speak, right? So, what would you recommend that when they get started with Twitter, should they push for founder voice first, or should they actually just focus on the company page instead?
I think it's one of those things that you want to hit both channels. You would want to think about a series or a format that basically works best for both the founder and honestly even the team. I think if you building a personal brand or even just building a company brand is one of the most valuable things. It is hard and organic takes time, but it is
Mhm.
very useful. And I think, as you mentioned, right, being able to build a brand on LinkedIn is super helpful for the company. That's actually, how I found about you guys was through your posts. And actually how we found out was through Grow Terminal, and we found your post and I was like, wow, this is really relevant to me. So I can reply to it. And so it's very important, I think, for both the founder and the team to be on socials, being able to talk about what you're doing. It's essentially, if you think about sales and marketing, one is basically top of funnel, one is bottom of funnel. And you're really trying to get
Mhm.
more people aware of what you're doing. If you're building something, the idea is that you want to be where your target market is or where they live. And every day, sort of today, everyone lives on socials. And so you want to be where they are, where you want to be hanging out at the posts that they see. And I think that's super important as the team, as well as building the brand where you're giving updates, maybe like telling more like serious or on brand sort of stories. But as the founder and as the team, I think you also need to be doing that.
Since you mentioned that it's important to be seen, moving to the question around brands, should they just aim at consistent engagement or should they be chasing viral moments like being more seen, or should they be
Hmm.
trying to balance both on X?
Yeah, I think on both, I'd say I always put X and LinkedIn a little bit. They're different, of course, but they are way more similar to like the Instagram and TikTok. I think those two are its own category, and X and LinkedIn is a little bit closer. I would say just from seeing um, like using our own examples and using our clients' examples, it's actually better to post consistently relevant posts to your brand that are high quality, that maybe like don't go viral. They're not getting like 100,000 of views, but maybe it's like a few thousand views or 10,000 views, because the views aren't equivalent. You can create a viral video, let's say that's like Sora generated, that would do really well on TikTok. But if the people seeing it aren't your customer base, then as you said, right, like the attribution is not good. It's very unclear how that does. Of course, if you're able to consistently create viral content in your niche, that's like the best. That's the best way forward. But to do that, usually you need to say something super controversial, or you need to just focus on that virality of like making it as interesting as possible. And sometimes that's not aligned with what you guys are building. It's not aligned with your actual brand. And in that way, you're just going to attract views where people are like, okay, this is cool, this is coming up my feed, but I'm not interested in buying this product, or I'm not interested in this niche. So not all views are equal, and I think it's more important to post consistently with the right format.
I totally agree. I think a couple of posts that I made around AI in content marketing or AI in SEO, they picked up pretty quickly, pretty quickly. But the problem is that while everybody was reposting it or retweeting it, they weren't exactly my TG. My TG was a
Mm.
B2B SaaS founder or a B2B SaaS CMO instead, who is thinking of allocating budgets towards AI, what to do with human resources, and the post just did not reach. Did it bump my profile? Yes. Did it get us a lot of eyeballs? Yes. Did it convert? Not really. So honestly, like, instead of posting a lot of controversial stuff after experimenting, I've taken a step away from posting it. I do it purposely, intentionally, whenever that I need a little bump in the profile. I'll go and I'll, kind of just purposely put something that's going to trigger everybody's nerves, and
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, I'm out of here now, back to normal posting. So that's a strategy that has, way really worked. One of the things that I can't crack on X, that's why I'm going to ask you. Niche conversations and communities thrive on X. Every single time I open X at night, honestly speaking, I'm like, I see these little groups and spaces where people are having conversations. I haven't joined a single one of them because I feel too overwhelmed. What's the best way for marketers to, kind of plug into these communities, groups, or spaces without really seeming very intrusive?
Yeah, I would say Twitter Spaces is different. I think you should just listen or participate in conversations that genuinely interest you. In terms of community, I'd say there's two things. So one, which is replying to people within those communities. So being able to, when prominent voices in that community post, being able to reply makes you visible to other people who are in your niche or in the community that you care about. And that's super effective. And to be honest, that's super effective on LinkedIn as well. Just sort of making the right replies will get you visible. Everyone reads the comments. That's kind of the one big lesson that we've seen across social media. Is true even for like TikTok and
Yeah.
Instagram. When you see a viral post, your first instinct is like, okay, I need to see the comments.
Yeah.
And I think that's one way of really like getting your visibility up, especially if you're starting. And then the second thing is you're actually able to post to communities. So with Growth Terminal, a lot of what we actually can help with is helping you, create the same post and actually post to multiple communities at the same time. So you might want to post the same content to the marketing community, or you might want to post the same post to the B2B SaaS growth or Build in Public. There are many communities on there that make it easier for you to plug in. And I think that's like one way that you can do it.
That's good. That's a good tip, because that's one thing that I haven't yet tapped into for my own profile or for my company's profile. And it is something that I'd like to get into, at least from a founder standpoint. That, yes, because there are a lot of insights as well in these communities. Now, coming to the one question that most of our connections, or most of the people who are going to be tuning into this, when they get started with social media marketing, the ROI is obviously not immediate. It's organic, takes a little while, it takes consistency. And of course, then, the conversation comes down to, hey, we've spent so much on social media, it's not leading to conversions. And if you were strategizing for a startup, a B2B startup, and they had to, kind of tap into X as a channel for social media, what are the 5 things you would recommend they do, 3 to 5 things they do before hitting just publish? Because I think everybody on every platform is just hitting publish, right? And obviously, all content doesn't quite really work. So, what would you recommend they do before they dive into X?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if they're just getting started, I would one first obviously get the team involved, whoever's like sort of interested in building their own brand, or the marketing team, them to start engaging with other people on the platform, especially like their customer segments. So people, if you think about it, you want to reach the influencers, for example, who are posting, and where, let's say you're really into B2B growth, or into sort of indie hackers, like listening to people like Greg Eisenberg, and being able to comment on his posts, because that's where your customers are, right? Like your customers are following this person. And so if you reply to their posts, your customers will see what you're doing. So starting to, consistently do that, people are like, oh, okay, I've seen this on Greg's post. I've seen this on Nick Huber's post, things like that, right? And so that would be the first step. And then the second step is constructing the actual content. And I would say that would come down to researching the trending topics in your niche, like what's happening in your niche, right? Is something new getting released? Is there a new sort of acquisition that's happening? And then being able to connect that with what you're building and connect that with your product. Like, okay, this is what's happening. This is my take on it. And this is how my product can help. I think that's usually the type of content that people is like, okay, wow, whatever's that's already trending on the timeline. I'm seeing this new company pop up. I'm seeing them post consistently. Like, let me follow them. And then the final thing would be recognizing the formats that work for you. So as you post consistently, there will be, I'd say, experiment both with topics and the format. And then once you find consistency that works in terms of like, hey, this format performs really well for me. Let's say it's like, doing a bullet point list of like the sort of newest things that's happening every week. People really like that in my niche, or like people really like this particular subtopic of like how to grow or how to market in my niche. Like, definitely, double down on that, and then be able to say like, okay, we're just going to post like at least 3 to 5 times a day, either from the brand accounts or the team accounts, just to get that algorithm liking your accounts. So yeah, I would say like that's usually the advice that we give out, and that's a lot of what our product does, is just helping you scrape the trending topics, reply to the right post, and then just post consistently once you figure out what that format is.
I think in line with what you just said, right? I like to use that pillar cluster model that HubSpot had given the world years ago. It helps really stick to relevance when the domain moves really, really fast, especially with marketing. And of course, there are like other industries. If you're in, you have to keep up with trends. You have to keep up with everything controversial. You have to keep up with everything which is non-controversial but trending, seasonal. And one of the things that I realized was that, when people try and be that consistent, especially with platforms like X, they tend to start creating content which moves gradually away from their brand. So the brand guardrails start to get pushed away and it sounds very, very different, right? And when you speak to them eventually, they're like, hey, because we had to, kind of create a lot of content, it's very hard to stick to the brand, right? In your opinion and in your experience so far, number one part of this question is just how necessary is it to publish multiple times a day on X? What's a sweet spot frequency? And number two, what can brands or the people running the brands do to ensure that the brand guidelines are being followed closely?
Yeah, I'd say at least once a day is pretty important. Like, just being able to get your reps in and do it every day is important. You don't have to hit 3 to 5 every day, but obviously, like, and you don't want to go over as well. If you start posting like 10 times a day, you'll be recognized as spam, and that's even
Mhm.
worse. So there's a sweet spot, right? So I'd say at least one post a day, optimally 3 to 5, and that's
Mhm.
true, I think, for sort of being able to post every day is pretty important for LinkedIn as well, in our experience, being that consistent. And you can just kind of repurpose content for both platforms, right? So if you're writing every day for LinkedIn, you can use the same post, just structured in a different way for X, and our product helps a lot with that as well.
Like,
So the team needs to be able to follow the guidelines, but I also don't think it needs to be that strict. So it depends, right? So it could be like, hey, I don't know, the example of brand guidelines might be like, hey, these are mission statements. Let's not write things that are directly against it. So if you're, for example, if you care about environmentally friendly things, like, don't write posts that are directly sort of in contrary to that, right? But otherwise, I do think it's important to have space to experiment. I think it's important to, just like what we do with product, being able to iterate and experiment. Oh, let's try this, see if people like it. That's super important for content as well. As you said, the algorithm moves very quickly and the trends move very quickly in in different spaces, especially if you're in anything AI, like it's moving so quickly, right? If you're in frontier tech, in crypto, and whatever it might be. And so being able to have the flexibility to be like, okay, let's try this, but not sort of directly go against our mission statements, I think is pretty important.
No, I 100% agree that you need room for experimentation. Otherwise, it's not even marketing if there's no experimentation. And
Right.
because you brought up AI, and that's going to be my last question to you, what do you think is the role of AI in Twitter marketing as of today? I mean, we've all gotten spammed with unnecessary messages, a lot of unnecessary comments that sound the same. You can practically now figure out a rhythm of comments that sound just the same. You're like, no, that's AI. I'm not even going to bother responding to that. So, what are your do's and don'ts, and where do you see AI in Twitter marketing?
Would say, yeah, that's a great question. I would say AI is really good for getting the first 80% of A, what you want to post, and B, what you want to reply. And I
Hmm.
stress the 80% because you need to really edit the last 20. You need to look at your post and be like, does this sound like us? Does this sound like me? AI is really good at like being able to help you research and getting if you get it the right sources, being able to get you the first, basically like have something written on paper, right? Like get over the first hump of like, oh my God, it's a blank page. What do I even write about, right? But you have to be doing the edits. If you don't, that's when people are like, dude, this is definitely not real. This is AI generated, right? Whether it's like, oh, there's a sneaky M dash that's in there, you know, and then in the comments as that's so right, really agree with you, that kind of tone is like very obvious that it's AI. And so you need to be able, as the content writer or the social media manager, to be like, okay, we're going to try and like have some sort of edit for all of it. And I think that's where people go wrong. It's like, they're just like, okay, let's just automate all the replies. It's like, yeah, you're going to appear as spam on many people's posts and they're going to block you. That is not good. So even if you use AI
Hmm.
to help you reply, you need to be editing like, okay, let me sound a little bit more real by editing like, a few words here and there.
Hmm. Hmm. That's actually a very, very good tip. One thing that I do say is yes, use AI for creating, like generating ideas, creating content, repurposing content, but one 5-minute layer of just going through it yourself is not going to eat into your time. It's not going to eat into your budget,
Yes.
but just do it because it needs to sound like you. Okay, on a parting note, what is that one tip that I can quote you on that you would give to B2B companies that want to make the most out of X today?
Most out of X today. Oh, one tip. One tip. I think honestly, the biggest tip would probably just to start posting. I think a lot of B2B companies would think, oh, X is not that relevant to me. And I think they'd be surprised. They could likely find their target market on there. And if they are able to build a brand there, their LinkedIn outreach, their cold emailing campaigns, I can definitely be on the betting side of saying that will go better because people will say, "Oh, I've heard of this company." Like, yeah, I'll entertain a call, right? Rather than just a cold company that you've never heard of talking to you about payroll, you'd be like, "I don't know you." But if you've
Mhm.
seen people on the team post or you've seen the brand, create really useful content, you'd be like, "Okay, there's some familiarity there." So I'd say start posting.
Good tip. I think that's something that I do want B2B companies to do more often. And that's one of the reasons I went back to the platform was that it is a good platform. You just need to understand how it works, the pace at which it works, and of course, the different formats of it. Well, Andros, thank you so much for joining today. This was fantastic. I am also going to link to your Twitter profile in this
Thank
so
you
that
so
people
much.
can get connected with you, spam you there with questions further. And we may have to do another session because I do know that you do LinkedIn well as well. So let's get on another session where we deep dive into LinkedIn instead.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. That was an awesome conversation.